Hi, I'm Justin Rothshank, and I'm here to invite you to the 12th Annual Michiana Pottery Tour, happening on September 23 and 24 in northern Indiana and southern Michigan. You'll find a list of the more than 50 participating artists, links to their web stores, and more information at www.michianapotterytour.com or on our Instagram page at Michiana Pottery Tour. Michiana Pottery Tour is a program of the new Northern Indiana Clay Alliance. We hope to see you this fall.
Welcome to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler podcast, featuring interviews with culture makers from around the world. This is Ben Carter. I'm going to be your host. If you'd like more information on the show, please visit our website, talesofaredclayrambler.com. Welcome back to episode 481 of the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Today on the show, I talk with Amy Sanders and Gleidymar Rivera. They were chosen for the Asparagus Valley Pottery Trail's Early Career Fellowship for BIPOC Ceramic Artists, a program that started this year to provide financial support and mentorship. In our interview, we talk about their style of making, balancing labor-intensive practices with the need to make a living, and how they prepared for their first major sale at the Asparagus Valley Pottery Tour last April. The deadline for this year's fellowship is coming up on October the 1st, so if you'd like to apply for that, you can go to apotterytrail.com. Before we get to that interview, I wanted to talk about a situation that's happening at West Virginia University. Over the past few years, major changes have been happening in ceramic departments across the U.S., and as I speak, the president of WVU has proposed that their storied ceramic department be shut down along with other visual arts programs. If you'd like to show your support for that department and for the arts in general, you can go to savewvuceramics.wordpress.com. There you can leave a letter of support and also find out addresses and places to mail administrators like the dean, the president, and other folks that are making these decisions to show that this is a bad idea. This is something that has happened at other universities, and one of the things we can do as a ceramic community is to show our support for the value of ceramic education. If you'd like to find out more about these cuts, you can also read an article by West Virginia professor Shoji Satake, which is in this week's Studio Potter. For that, you can go to studiopotter.org and search Save West Virginia University Ceramics. Without further ado, we'll get to the interview. Well, to start, I'm just going to have you all introduce yourself just to get your voice with your name, and we'll start with you, Amy.
I'm Amy Sanders. I am currently a second-year resident at the Moran Center for Clay at St. Petersburg, Florida.
My name's Gleidymar. I currently work at the Firestone Art Studio where I manage and teach multi-week classes.
Well, let's start with you, Gleidymar. Can you talk about what you're interested in terms of surface design? Because when I look at your pots, I really think they're surface forward. So could you talk about your inspirations?
Yeah, they certainly are. I think for the first couple of years of working, I didn't do any surface at all. Like I was so interested in such a smooth surface. I started with terracotta, so like burnishing was really interesting to me. So most of my work up until maybe about a year ago is when I started working with sgraffito work. And most of the imagery is like botanical. So I'll do work in like umbrella trees or like eucalyptus leaves and things like that. But yeah, it's something about the surface being so smooth made me want to finally do something with it. And I think sgraffito was something that I was always interested in, especially coming from a background in embroidery where like line work is really important. So I kind of wanted to transfer that onto my work. And then also just, I think the botanical part, the reason why that is so prominent for me, at least, is my Puerto Rican heritage. So like that abundance of nature is so prominent. And so I kind of always wanted to bring that back anytime I went to visit. I always wanted to have something in my house that looked like that and reminded me of Puerto Rico. Yeah, started making it.
So it's really about a tie to home as well as being surface design.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think like what I bring into my home, I don't think I realize this, but I do it with intention. So like what I bring is really important to me. So being able to make it how I envisioned it, how I felt when I was there is something I'm still exploring, but it's really important in my work.
For folks that haven't been to Puerto Rico, can you describe that distinction between the city and kind of the rural area? Because my experience is, as soon as you leave the city, there's vegetation everywhere.
Yeah, it's a different world. It's like everything has greenery on it. The last time I went, I spent both some time in the city and a little bit of time with my family in the mountains. And it's just so vast. It almost feels like you're intruding a little bit because there's just so much greenery, you know? Which like in Florida reminds me a lot of whenever I go to Florida, my family's there too. Just how it envelops you. But in Puerto Rico, because of like the way that the mountains work and things like that, it's almost as if every corner you're entering a new place, a new world. And it's something that being from there, I feel like my tie is obviously more it's stronger, right? What I was getting back to was the last time I was there, I took photos of greenery, of like weeds, of different plants that were just like sprouting through the most unorthodox places. Like you could see it like going up like a just like an electrical box that like wasn't working anymore, or like through the concrete, through an old building that like no longer anyone was residing in. And that like was really impactful to me because it was just growing out of nowhere. Like, or at least it seemed like it was, you know? So that is special to me about Puerto Rico.
Amy, can you talk a little bit about your sense of surface and form specifically?
Most of my work is based off of text and like line weights and how that they turn from very like nice curvilinear lines to really drastic angles. When I'm making, I really like to play around. So I dart a lot of my work, probably 90% to maybe 100. I haven't like done the math, but when I look at my forms, they do reflect text in a way I don't specifically seek out and like look at a specific word or letter, but I do look at how I can change the angles and really get a nice sense of like direction and emulate line weight and the change in it that like calligraphy has. So that's kind of where most of my inspiration comes from when I'm trying to attend to surface and attend to the form of the pot. And I try as best as I can to create repetition in form as well as what it repeats on the surface in regards to also negative space as well. I really enjoy making teapots and pitchers and pouring vessels. So that negative space in the handles really are important to the repetition in what I do on my surface and what I do on my as far as my form.
Yeah, and I think about those handles as now that you say that it's about letters and line weight, I think about that as almost being the tops of letters, like the way things swoop up to a point and then shoot back down into the form. And I've really seen lately or at least the pots. I think you were at Pinland recently, right?
Yeah, I was assisting Lindsay Rogers on Pots and Food workshop there.
Because that teapot that you have on your Instagram, everything is thicker. Like the handle is thicker, the way the spout comes up is thicker, and that heft is really nice. Like it has some real visual impact.
Well, I feel like when you start off, most people are like trying to get the perfect, like thin and like dainty form. And I mean, right now I'm like trying to readdress that, but like learn to be okay with everything looking maybe a little bit visually heavier. It may not physically be heavy, but like visual weight is also another thing to think about. And it's like, it's really exciting to address these forms and like make them in different ways and just change, like, because when I dart, I don't use templates or anything. So it's very intuitive. So every single pot is going to be slightly different, which is also fun. But it also stinks if I make a really great line and then I can't repeat it.
Have you thought about using templates just as a reminder tool in that way?
I sketch a lot on my iPad. So a lot of the time, what I'll do is I'll take a picture of the pot and then read on that picture on my iPad. I use like Procreate. I'll draw the general idea of what dart I made on the pot just to remind myself. But in a way, like you're never going to write your name the same way. Like it might be really similar, but it's never going to be exactly the same. So I never want my like pots to be repetitive. And I've like thought about using molds, and the idea of that exact repetition isn't something that I want to do. I really do enjoy the intuitiveness and just like the reaction that I have at that moment on my work. So,
Gleidymar, with your work, how are you repeating? Because when I see you drawing, they do look like the patterns are almost exactly the same going across. Are you freehanding all that?
Yeah, it is mostly freehand. I've tried to do like transfer paper and things like that, but I feel like it kind of takes away a little bit of the movement and it feels a little too static. So I generally do freehand all of the work. I will like take photos of like my plants at home, like say the umbrella plant. I'll take photos of them. So I will kind of reference the same photo. So that's probably why they look similar throughout.
Yeah, I do the same. I've gotten to where if I make the bloom on the flowers that I'm painting, I've cut this little foam so that way I can kind of make the scale right. But I found that everything is a lot more energetic if I'm actually drawing it than if I'm tracing it, which it would be a lot faster if I could just trace it.
It sure would.
So that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you both about, is just this idea of being young artists wanting to make a living, but then loving something that's labor intensive. So how do you guys sort of balance your time versus money and how much you get paid for your time at this point in your career?
I think that's a tricky one. I think I'm still trying to figure that part out. Now that I have a full-time job at the studio, I manage the studio, so that does take up a lot of my time. So I do have to be really strategic about when I work. And I think asparagus actually helped me do that because I was able to really dedicate some time to that. But yeah, I think I'm still figuring that out.
Mhm.
the luxury of being a resident is that there is like some level of like work exchange, and so I don't have to pay for my studio, which is really nice, and materials come at a very minimal cost as far as facilities. So really my only well, not only, but really the only thing I pay for is my necessities for living and rent. And it's not cheap in Florida. So I actually bartend on the side. So, um, but besides teaching and bartending, I spend most of my time in the studio. I was teaching kids camp this summer. So I basically took a break from making for a while, and I think that breaks are sometimes super important in your practice as far as making in the studio is not the only aspect of your studio practice. You can grow by doing experiences like going to Penland, other craft schools, even just research. So I've been trying to figure out my studio practices, I guess, as far as like if I were to attack it as a studio potter. But since I personally right now don't need to be making pots to live, if I were to make that transition, that would just be a whole new studio practice. And then being a resident versus being a student, your studio practice just changes as far as like where you are. And I think it's ever evolving. And I'm kind of getting comfortable now being like a second year resident because things change and now you're looked at more and you have all this responsibility of helping in the guidance of the first year residents. So I don't know. I guess I don't have like a very stringent answer, but I do spend at least probably like 60 plus hours in the studio, just whether I've been making tools recently, which I count as my studio practice, even if I'm not making pots. It's just something that gets me in the studio and gets me excited about then using the tools to make pots. So.
Yeah. What have you been making? What are the tools?
So I started off with making paddles. And so because I started hand building a little bit more. And so I've been making paddles. I just made some ribs the other day out of, oh my goodness, brass. And I'm on another round of paddles again. I got stuff to make some loop tools. So I'm like having lots of fun tool making right now as well, which has been kind of fun. And I think that if I start making my own tools, my mark making then really like comes exactly from my hand. And I think that's kind of special in a way.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you're doing that because I've made like small ribs, but I like that you're gonna make a loop tool. That's legit.
Yeah. I don't know how successful it'll be, but I definitely got enough stuff to make some failure pieces and hopefully make it like one success.
Well, when you talked about that you don't have to make a living off the pots because you have other income, I think that's something that's always important for younger artists to not feel bad about. Because, like, when I was coming up, I would always think one day I'm just going to be successful enough that I can just make pots. But I did reach that point, but then I made less money making just pots than I did having other jobs. And I was just talking to my wife about this the other day, and she was just like, yeah, why would you not do the thing that makes the most money? And it just kind of like dawned on me that we often have expectations of ourselves that are based off of aesthetic goals that have nothing to do with reality. Like we really want to make a great show, even if we lose money.
Yeah.
So I think there's this like some part of finding that balance and also just practically, like if your rent is X amount of dollars, you have to make that much money every month just to live.
I always feared if I ever became a studio potter and that was like my sole source of income, that some of my work would feel disingenuous because, you got to make what sells. And so, and I'm still at a very like early stage in my career, as most young artists are, that I think it's important to explore what, or who you are as an artist to before you start selling your work in a way so that you realize like what you enjoy and who you are. I mean, it's very important to kind of get through those stages of growth before it becomes your sole source of income.
So Gleidymar, I noticed that you do commissions and you list that on your website, like as your welcoming commissions. And you had made one that was pretty large. It was like 30 plus pieces for a bed and breakfast. So can you talk about that process of getting that commission and how that all worked?
Most of my commissions, I guess, come from or whenever I do markets. So even if I don't sell all that much of the markets, I always end up with a couple commissions. So this one was about the same. And it was this bed and breakfast owner. Her name's Maria. And I met her at the market that we have at my studio. We have it once a month. And she just happened to come by, and she saw my last name actually and was like, "Where are you from?" and I was like, "Oh, my family's from Puerto Rico." She's like, "Same, same." And like, she got so excited and started talking to me in Spanish. And I realized I don't know how to talk about ceramics in Spanish in that moment. But she told me that she was starting a bed and breakfast in Mexico. And she's a chef, and she wanted really specific style of plates, and she wanted me to make them. And so it took us about 2 months or so back and forth. She would like leave me like WhatsApp, like voice memos of her ideas. So we finally figured out like a plan, and it was just like I use this buff clay mostly. So it's this buff clay with like very minimal glaze work, some splatter work there. And then these trays that I used, I had to buy so much wood to do this, but I would impress, like, which like I don't need the wood. I'm electric. So, and I would like do an impression of the clay on the wood to get this kind of texture that she wanted. So it was really fun because generally with commissions, it's maybe more about the person ordering the commission, but with her it felt very collaborative, and we were able to come up with something that we both really like enjoyed and really liked. So that was really nice, and knowing that like there's folks out in Mexico that I've never been to using my plates is like really, really nice.
So is part of the deal, do you get to go to the bed and breakfast at some point?
Yes, that is part of the deal. I haven't cashed in on that yet, but
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Hi, I'm Kara, content creator and Facebook wrangler for Amico Brent, bringing you ideas and support for your creative adventures every day. This week's episode is brought to you by Amico Brent. Find your favorite Amico glaze at your local distributor. Happy glazing!
Today's episode is brought to you by the Rosenfeld Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. The collection exists as an online resource for research and inspiration, featuring photos of thousands of objects made by over 800 artists. The images are high quality and can be used with no permission required, making them a great resource for students and teachers. To find out more, visit rosenfeldcollection.com. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about education. And I wanted to actually start with you, Amy, because we know each other from your connection through West Virginia, which I think weren't we at Aramont together? Weren't you with Jen?
Yeah, I was with Jen. Yep.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. And right now, West Virginia University is potentially going through some major, major changes. And it's been sad. I mean, essentially, they want to cut a lot of the programming in the humanities specifically. But I think one of the things that's important is just for people to hear how significant undergraduate education is and how valuable it is. So can you talk a little bit about what you got from West Virginia and how that has impacted you as a maker?
I'm really glad you brought that up. I mean, yes. So I graduated in 2020 from WVU, and the professors at the time were Boomer Moore, Shoji Satake, Jen Allen, and Shalai Marsh. And I mean, I can 100% say that I wouldn't be where I am without any of those 4 faculty members. I mean, the entire staff and the arts department. You can just tell how hard they work and how committed they are to education and teaching, the next generation. And I would be devastated to see that program go. My professors are definitely like still engaging in what I'm doing as a maker. And so without those connections, I probably wouldn't be making.
To let the listeners know, they're essentially proposing that they would cut large parts of the art department as a whole, as well as other departments. I think we're all used to maybe things getting smaller. We're not used to things going away. And that, is shocking when you hear that a program might be cut.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what I heard is that these announcements were made the day after tuition was due. So it wasn't even like chatted about before. Through what I know is that it just came like out of the blue, and most people were just like shell shocked about the news and what was possibly going to happen.
How did you pick West Virginia? Because you didn't grow up in West Virginia, right?
No, I grew up in Eastern Pennsylvania. I grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania. In all honesty, I actually followed my best friend, who's also a maker. His name's Derek Reynoso. He also went through the WVU program. And so I'm going to backtrack. I started off as a business administration major at a community college. So I was kind of just bopping around. There were definitely some important reasons as to why I stayed back, and I think it definitely helped my development. But when I was ready to kind of spread my wings and continue on with my education, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew it really wasn't business. And yeah, I decided to go to while I was attending school at the community college, I decided to continue on with pottery because I started a little bit in high school, and I knew I enjoyed it, but I didn't know how much it was going to be a part of my life at that point. And so I was going to a small community college, community studio, and in a few towns over. And so I think I was like, you know what, I'm going to shoot my shot. I'm going to put in a portfolio together, send in an application, and, just see what happens. Because it seemed that I would gravitate more towards the studio than I would school. Not that business isn't a great thing to learn. It definitely has helped me as far as how I think about the business side of ceramics. But yeah, I applied and I got in, and I told my mom that I was going as a double major, which I started off doing, and then I just dropped that business part. The double major was like me trying to continually be practical, but I was like, I don't think I'll ever use this, and I think that it would add an extra like year and a half of tuition money that I don't have. So, and I was like, and I'm going to work really hard at this, and this is what I want to do. So I decided to just drop that major and become a full-time ceramics student. And I didn't know any of the professors before that, and I didn't know the pedigree that they held. I was just very ignorant to like who I had in front of me. I was like, oh yeah, it's just Jen. And they're like, it's Jen Allen. Like, she is like one of the rock stars of ceramics, like not just Jen. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, I feel so dumb.
Well, I think this is a good example of these major land grant universities. Like West Virginia University is I'm pretty sure it's the biggest university in the state. Like, students come there from a whole variety of walks of life. But then once you're in there, the environment is so special. Like their program, the quality of professors, the amount of students that come through their China program that they take people to Jingdezhen and have for, I don't even know how long that's been going on, like 30 or 40 years. That started way back in the day. And you're an example about how you probably didn't even know how special it was going to be, but now on the other side, it's the thing that's defined you and the way you think about art. So I hope that people might consider, there's a petition going around that people can sign that will be sent to some of the administrators. There's also letters that are being sent directly to the administrators to kind of plead for the program. But I thought we'd just work that into our conversation today.
for sure.
So, Gleidymar, with you, how do you think your education has shaped who you are today?
A good question. I, like Amy, I started off in an entirely different field. I went to school for communications and marketing, and it was mostly the same thing. Like I really thought, okay, this is just like the practical route. I can do pottery, I could do art on the side. And then into my junior year, I kind of had like a year of crisis, and I was like, you know what, I need art again. I need to do it. And I took some oil painting classes, which I used to paint before I entirely went over to ceramics. And it didn't fill that like creative like void that I had. So I moved over to ceramics, and then I spent every waking moment that I could in the studio. And it really like, it felt like an oh no moment, because it's like, oh wait, I'm in my senior year. I already have this degree and I can't go back. But my professor at the time, Salvador Jimenez, he was like, you know, you can just keep coming to the studio. Like you could just make the most out of it. Like, sure, you might not go away with a ceramics degree, but you can learn as much as you want during this time. And he like really allowed me to just explore on my own. So I went away from college being like, okay, I might not use this degree, and I didn't. But then I found through a couple, like, I guess let me go back. Once I graduated, I tried to work in a museum setting. So I worked there for almost a year, a museum nearby. And again, it felt nice to be in the presence of art and in the creative community, but it still wasn't enough. I still felt like this need to create. So once I found the studio I'm at now, the Firestone, I was able to just entirely work in clay, 40 hours a week. And it's pretty unorthodox the way I found my way back to it, but I did. And I'm really happy I have. So, I think just because I may not have like the MFA or the BFA, I still feel like I have found a place where I feel comfortable making, I feel like happy doing what I'm doing. So in the future, I might want to go back, but for now, I feel pretty good where I'm at.
Well, out of all the people I've talked to over the years, I've heard this story so many times. Like I got to my senior year and I abandoned ship and became an art major, or at least, focused on art classes. I think that's the power of clay and ultimately the power of craft. Like there's something so intellectually demanding about trying to learn something like a craft. So it's good to hear that happened to you. But I actually have a marketing question that's going to sound totally oddball, but I think that it's going to make sense. I was looking at what you guys offer, the Firestone. Is it Firestone?
Yeah, the Firestone.
Gotcha. And I saw that you guys do themed nights. So you'll have making around themes. And one of the themes was Barbie.
Yes.
So talk to me about like giving people an entry point with pop culture, but then having clay be the thing they're making.
It was a big deal. We all actually watched it, like all of my coworkers and I went and watched it. And I think that's what inspired us to make the Barbie theme. And that's not my department per se, but what's really nice about the Firestone, because we've only been open for about 3.5 years. And it's a really fresh, like new team, that like these new ideas that might have not worked elsewhere, I think we're able to explore. So Barbie night, they had a Taylor Swift night a couple days ago. It's really nice to be in that space where you're allowed to do things that may not have worked elsewhere. But for Barbie, just like last week, I was helping them make the Barbie box, the like life-size Barbie box. So I was like, I never knew that this would be my day job, just making a life-size Barbie box. But it is.
sometimes art can seem very pretentious, and I think that keeps people away. Like we seem like we're smart, we're intellectual, we're hoity-toity, and when you match pop culture with making, it dissolves all of that. Because if people like a movie, it doesn't matter where they went to school, it doesn't matter any of that. They're just going to come and have fun, and probably, we'll see over time, but I would imagine you might get some long-term students just from that first experience.
Yeah, we certainly do. So the thing about the studio is it's like in 3 parts. It has the paint your own pottery studio, it has a cafe, and then it has the clay studio. And so because it's such an open concept, people come in for a variety of reasons. And we have just a variety of people that don't even realize that clay is an option, and they walk in, and I've seen it firsthand, someone that's like never touched clay in their life, and now they've been with us for 2 years, and they're making teapots, So it's really nice being that entry point for people and seeing that firsthand.
And actually, this ties back to the Morian where you are, Amy, because that also has a cafe, a event space, a residency. Like that art center is phenomenal for people who haven't been in St. Pete. You guys have everything. You also have a ton of kilns, which is impressive.
For sure, yeah. We just opened a new wine and cheese bar at the front. We have 2 gallery spaces. We're getting our workshops back up and running again. I teach a few of the workshops, and it's really great. Our operations manager, Cody Thompson, he's so receptive to change and new ideas, and it's really great to see this place growing to what just a really great space. And yeah, there's the event space in the back, which mainly is weddings now. So but I think that's just some good publicity for people, and it's an old train station, so people are just innately interested in the building itself, and then walk in and see that there's this thriving arts community in here.
So I wanted to end our talk today talking about the Asparagus Valley Pottery Trail. That's something that both of you had a fellowship to help be a part of that was last year, right?
It was April.
April. Okay, so that was this year. Can you maybe start, Amy, and just talk about the preparing for something like this? Like, how do you prepare for something like that for the first time?
It was pretty daunting, actually, because my primary making was educational. So the idea wasn't for selling or market. I felt underprepared, but I was probably more prepared than I thought. I had a regiment and a list of what I wanted to make, what I wanted available. Some of the pieces definitely were not super not consumer friendly, but they were more sculptural, just to show them that this is also what I do. But I'm very checklist friendly, so I made my checklist and I checked it 5 times before, and so I prepared by making months in advance, as soon as I found out about the scholarship opportunity.
So I think I applied and found out that I was accepted about 6 months or so before the actual tour, and I got a chance to chat with Steve Thaberg, who was my host for the Potty Trail. And he gave me a lot of great advice, and he gave me a range. He's like, you might want maybe 80 to 120 pieces, something like that. And I was like, oh, that's a lot. Coming from I didn't really have anything other than my personal work, I was like, oh, this is gonna be a project. So Amy, a checklist. I think I made multi-month schedules, just being all right, this is when you're making, and this is when you're doing this and that, because working full time, you have to carve out that time, right? So it at first felt daunting, but once I got closer and closer to the time, it was really nice to be able to make a series with a sole like intention, right? Knowing that like they would all be displayed together, knowing that like they would, people would be coming from all walks of life to see it, was really nice because it allowed me to really focus on just making that series. And that's where I was able to refine some of my sgraffito work and some of my line work there too. So I think it felt chaotic at the time, but once everything was said and done, it's what I wanted. You know what I mean? I was very happy with how it ended up.
How was it to be there selling your work? Like, what type of feedback did you get, and how were the sales?
It was incredible. I mean, I've done other pottery, like small pottery tours in the past, but this one was on another level. I mean, we set up on Friday, and then the tour was Saturday and Sunday. And by Saturday, we're starting at 10 a.m. There was people already there at 10 a.m. ready to buy. And it was, I think, the busiest amount, like so many people. It was so exciting to see just the amount of people that were already, we were maybe their second, third, fourth stop on the trail. So they were really invested in like asking you, what are you making? What are you interested in? Like they were really focused on the maker, which from other, vendor sale opportunities, that wasn't really the case. It was more about the pieces themselves. So it was nice speaking to artists firsthand, and just seeing the feedback. It was just such a pleasant place. If you've never been to Northampton, couldn't say anything better about it.
I had pretty much the exact same reaction. It was definitely like, I was surprised to see that. So my host was Jamie Gugina, and he had people in his studio at like 9:45. The sale started at 10, and he's like, so you guys can look, but we can't do purchases yet. We're still setting up, like, just so you guys know, but you can look around. And like, I'm just like, I'm prepared, but I like feel frantic. And so I'm like, still like, just like, twisting the mug, just right, air quote. And I'm like, and I finally look up and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's like 15 people in here, and we still have 5 minutes to go. But I mean, that just shows how like strong and amazing that little arts community in Asparagus Valley is. And so, I mean, I enjoyed the exchanges that I made with the consumers, so the people coming to visit and walking through the tour, but as well as like the other artists that were there. I'd never met any of them, so it was really nice to engage in conversation with people in different regions, and it's always great to get different feedback from other people.
Yeah, and I wanted to plug for artists that might be listening that want to apply. The deadline for this year is coming up October the 1st, and you can just you can Google Asparagus Valley Pottery Trail, and it's called the Early Career Fellowship for BIPOC Ceramic Artists. So definitely check that out if you're interested in getting a start. To wrap up, can you guys just leave your social media so if people want to reach out that they can?
My social media is Gleidymar R, so it's GLEIDYMARR, and my website is the same, gleidymarrivera.com.
And my Instagram is at Amy Sanders Ceramics, and then my website is currently under construction, but there'll be a link eventually.
Well, thank you all for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having both of us.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure.
I'd like to thank Amy and Gleidymar for coming on the show. It was a pleasure to chat with them, and also wanted to congratulate them on winning the Early Career Fellowship from the Asparagus Valley Pottery Tour. If you're a BIPOC emerging artist and you're interested in applying for that fellowship, the deadline is coming up on October the 1st. And you can find out more and apply today at apotterytrail.com. Before we go, I wanted to thank today's sponsors. That's Amico Brent, the Michiana Pottery Tour, the Archie Bray Foundation, and the Rosenfield Collection of Functional Ceramic Art. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor on one of our podcasts, you can get in touch through the network website. That's brickyardnetwork.org. I'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you all for tuning in. If you'd like more information on the artists on the show, or if you'd like more information about the workshops and events that I'll be having in the next couple months, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Carter Pottery. Another great way to support the show is to leave me a comment on iTunes. To do that, search Tales of a Red Clay Rambler under iTunes Podcasts, and you'll find a page that's linked to our show. Thank you guys for the support.
This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.